Okay, guys, good afternoon. I am going to put up a super, well, not super quick, maybe about a 5 or 10 minute video that is hopefully going to be helpful to you as you were working through problems for homework for tomorrow. Now, remember how I told you that things are going to start to build in chemistry. That's where we are. Okay, so we are taking some of the skills we've learned in previous chapters and you're starting to smash them all together and work in a cohesive way. So some of the things that you need to be able to do, okay, to complete your homework and to understand and move through this chapter is you got to go back to things we learned 2 chapters ago. 2 chapters ago, we learned how to make compounds. We learned that when metals form, they create ions, and each one makes an ion, and then they create an ionic compound, right? We learned that when covalent compounds form, they form a little differently. But we also learned how to name covalent compounds. All right, so we're going to start to apply some of those principles and learn how to use those naming techniques and forming compounds, the techniques for doing that, to be able to write a chemical equation. And then we will learn to balance it. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to go through a couple of examples for you. Here's one. Aluminum and oxygen together form aluminum oxide. Okay, and on the paper I have in front of me, it tells me that the formula for aluminum oxide is Al2O3. Okay, so they've told me, I've been told how to make aluminum oxide, what that final product is. But we're going to start with aluminum, which is Al, and we're going to add oxygen to that. Now, I cannot just write O because oxygen is a homonuclear diatomic. So whenever I write it as a reactant by itself, it has to have a 2. Okay? Not in a product, obviously we have O3, but when oxygen is either in the reactants or in the products by itself, it's always O2. Okay? So aluminum plus oxide makes aluminum oxide. But we're not done because we haven't balanced it, so we have to do that. It's simply aluminum and oxygen, reactants, products. Let's balance it. I have 1 aluminum, I have 2 oxygens. Over here I have 3 oxygens and 2 aluminums. Now, we know we're going to have at least 2 aluminums, right? Because we can't lose any. So if we end up with 2, we at least started with 2. However, before I do that, I want you to take a look at something. I've got 3 oxygens. I can't multiply this by 1.5 because there's no such thing as half of an oxygen, right? That doesn't exist. They have to always be in whole number increments. So if I have to end up with a minimum of 3, I'm going to have to probably have a multiplier of 3 because I can't get from 2 to 3. So I'm going to start by putting a 2 out in front of that. And then I'm going to check my balancing. I now have 4 aluminums and I have 6 oxygens. 2 times 3. Now I can come back over here. Well, I ended up with 4 aluminums. That means I must have started with 4 aluminums. Check that. That's 4. I have an O2 by itself. I've got to end up with a total of 6 oxygens. So if I put a 3 in front of my O2, I'm going to have 6, and I now have a balanced chemical reaction. Okay? This would be a formation reaction. Okay? Now, let's do another not a formation, but a displacement reaction. Here's the reaction. Potassium. I'm going to write out the words they're telling me. And if you can't finish all your homework for tomorrow, here are the things I want you to do. Here's what I've been given. Potassium plus magnesium bromide. I'm just going to write. Okay, those two they react together and they form, the paper tells me it forms potassium bromide. All right. Plus magnesium. Now, when you start, now this is all in words, but we're going to take that and we're going to change these words into compounds where that's necessary. Potassium is an element. It's by itself, so I'm just going to write a K. Actually, I'm going to drop it a little bit lower down. Okay? And not that far. All right, potassium. Magnesium bromide. Okay, one of the things you need to recognize here is that is what kind of compound? It is an ionic compound, right? Because magnesium is a metal, so this is ionic. Right? So I've got to use ionic processes to create a compound from I do that? I determine the ions that those single elements make when they go together. Magnesium is in column 2A. Okay, so it's going to have an overall charge when it gives off its first 2 electrons, or its 2 valence electrons. It's going to have an overall charge of 2 plus. Bromine is in column 7A, so when it gains 1 electron as an ion, it's going to have a charge of 1 minus. So how do I make that be balanced? Well, remember, I drop them and swap them. So MgBr2, magnesium bromide. Okay, that's my second reactant. And now I'm going to make potassium bromide. Potassium is also a metal. It's in column 1A. So this is also ionic. So I'm going to determine the ions it will form in order to make my compound. Potassium is in 1A. That means it's going to have a charge of 1 plus. Bromide, is in column 7A. We already recognize it's going to have a charge of -1. So for this one, it's just going to be KBr. That's going to make a neutral compound, plus magnesium. Now some of you may be going, wait. I started with 2 bromines, and I can't just ignore that. You're right. I don't ignore it. Where I account for it is in my balancing. So let's do that. Now we have potassium, magnesium, and bromine. Reactants, products. Let's see what we've got. I have 1 potassium, 1 magnesium, and 2 bromines. And over here, I've got 1 potassium, 1 magnesium, and 1 bromine. So now I got to go about doing my balancing. Well, I know if I started out with 2 bromine atoms, I have to end with at least 2 bromine atoms. So I'm going to put a 2 out there. So that means my potassium is now 2. My bromine is now 2. It doesn't affect my magnesium. These are balanced. This one is not, but I can come back over here, add a 2 in front of my K, my potassium, and that makes that balance. 2 potassiums, 1 magnesium, 2 bromines. And that's how you balance. So that's the process you're going to work through. If you're struggling, what I want you to do is to at least do this part. Write down the names, attempt to form the compounds. We'll work on it more together in class tomorrow. All right, see you tomorrow.